In 595, Pope Gregory I decided to send a mission to Britain to convert the Saxons who had taken over much of the land to Christianity. He looked around and he chose a chap called Augustine, who was the prior at the Abbey of St Andrew in Rome. Clever man with a lot of administrative skills. With him he sent about 40 monks. Ethelbert was the King of Kent and a major influence throughout the Saxon people within Britain. He had married, although a pagan himself, he had married a Christian princess called Bertha, and part of the marriage agreement was that she should come to Britain with her own bishop, Ludhard. Between them, Ludhard and the princess, they re-established a Roman church within Canterbury, which was the centre of the Kingdom of Kent, and they re-established a church there which we believe is St Martin's Church today. So when Augustine arrived in 597, although Ethelbert was a pagan, he was very interested and understood a lot about Christianity. Augustine arrived at Ebbsfleet in Kent, and he was taken to the king and Bertha in Canterbury. The king allowed him to preach at the church and make a centre there where he could preach to the people and carry out conversions into Christianity, which is why he came. It wasn't long though before Ethelbert himself was converted. In that same year he was converted and baptised somewhere in Canterbury. So then Augustine was able to set up his see in Canterbury, and the mass conversion started, obviously following in the footsteps of the king. By 604 AD, the Christianity was strong enough that Augustine felt that he could set up a new bishopric in Rochester, and he consecrated his friend who had come with him, Justus, as the first bishop of Rochester. Why Rochester? It was a small town with one street, but the political implications was that it was at the junction of Watling Street and the Medway Estuary, and therefore a fortified town. So Ethelbert gave lands, built a church for Justus that he dedicated to St Andrew, the patron saint of the abbey where he'd come from in Rome. And he was able to establish his church there and obviously build his flock. By 1066, when William the Conqueror arrives, he gives the church and the lands to his brother Odo of Bayeux, who over the following years misappropriates the funds and the property, and so much so that the church is bust. It has no money, it's in decay, it needs repairs. Lanfranc, the Archbishop of Canterbury, took Odo to task, and in 1077 Odo finally lost the day, and the lands were confiscated from him. Lanfranc consecrated Gandalf as Bishop of Rochester, and the lands were restored and the property, and by 1080 he was able to commence building a new cathedral. By the time he died in 1108, the west entrance as we see now and the nave were complete. The rest of the cathedral was not completed and consecrated until 1130, when the Archbishop of Canterbury and 13 bishops dedicated it in attendance from Henry I. Unfortunately, the whole day was marred by a massive fire within the town, and which nearly destroyed the cathedral. But we can look now and see the cathedral that is on the site of the second oldest cathedral, Christian cathedral in the country. The original cathedral was 42 feet high and 28 feet wide. The apse is marked on the current cathedral floor and sets out to show the line of the walls. There's corresponding lines outside the cathedral on in two cobble lines. King Ethelbert is given credit for the construction of the original St Andrew's Church by Bede, who describes St Paulinus' burial as in the sanctuary of the blessed Apostle Andrew, which King Ethelbert founded. Likewise he built the city of Rochester. And there's the west door entrance. The two statues either side of the door are thought to be Solomon and Sheba, with the two bishops higher up either side of the facade. Above the door is Christ, and he's seated, surrounded by angels, and the four Gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. Matthew is the winged man, Mark winged lion, Luke winged bull, and John is the eagle. The nave, or the present nave, was built by Bishop Gandalf in 1083, and the nave and the west door were completed before his death. The rest of the cathedral was completed in 1130, when it was consecrated in the presence of Henry I. Although fires destroyed the wooden roof of the nave and much of Rochester from time to time in the 12th and early 13th century. The arcades and the triforium are fine mid-12th century work, partly rebuilt in the 13th century. The clerestories and roof were raised in the 15th century and extensively restored in the 19th. And there we see the font, Victorian Gothic Revival style, created by and sculpted by Thomas Earp in limestone with columns and Gothic arches. It's near the west door and its traditional place, although there are plans to relocate it to the north door, where with the fresco. Most of the nave is built in Norman or Romanesque style, with rounded arches which have typical Norman decoration. Because of the damage done by the two serious fires in the 12th century, a new cathedral was started in the early 13th century, and then a new style of building known as Gothic or Early English. Some of the pillars can be seen graffiti or sketches which were used for brightly painted scenes of Bible stories which would have adorned them. These pictures would have helped mainly illiterate population learn their Bible stories. They were all destroyed though during the Reformation. The screen separating the choir from the nave was designed by John Loughborough Pearson in 1889. It depicts 8 saints and bishops that had connections with Rochester. And there's the first St Andrew, who which was the monastery was dedicated to St Andrew in Rome, where St Augustine and St Justus came from. And there's St Ethelbert, King Ethelbert. He was the original pagan Saxon to be converted, and he then set about spreading Christianity, or helping to spread Christianity throughout Kent. Justus, he arrived with Augustus and was consecrated as the first bishop of Rochester in 604 AD. After the death of Ethelbert, there was a pagan backlash in 1616, and he disappeared to Gaul, returning a year later. There we see Paulinus, a member of the second wave of missionaries sent by Pope Gregory, and he was enshrined in the cathedral. Gandalf, consecrated as Bishop of Rochester by Lanfranc, and then set about rebuilding the building into its present state. William of Hoo, he was elected prior in 1239, and with the offerings made to St William of Perth, rebuilt the choir. Walter de Merton, founder of Merton College, Oxford, and Bishop of Rochester from 1274 to 1277. And finally John Fisher, martyred by Henry VIII in 1535 for refusing to agree to the reformation of the Anglican Church. The current organ, or the current pipe organ, was built by J.W. Walker and Sons in 1905 and later rebuilt by Amanda Organs in 1989. And they also installed a new choir organ and pipe work under the advice of Paul Howell, and very beautiful it is too. Pipe work is absolutely amazing. And there on the other side you can see that is the choir side. The choir is where the monks used to sing their services, and where today one of 4 choirs at Rochester Cathedral sings during services. The cathedra there is the bishop's throne, and it's what gives the cathedral its designation. Beside the cathedra is the bishop's crozier, like a shepherd's crook. This is symbolic of Jesus, and likened him to a shepherd of the people. The brass lectern, shaped like a golden eagle, holds a copy of the Bible. The golden eagle is such a strong bird that it is strong enough to carry the word of God, the Bible, on its back, and it flies very high in the sky near to heaven. And there's the open wooden pulpit. The proscenium, where the priests sit during the services. At the end of the east end of the cathedral is the high altar, the most special of several altars in the cathedral. It's called high because it is the main altar and also physically the highest altar in the cathedral. It is at the east or light end, as each day the light of the dawning sun reminds us of the resurrection. The reredos there behind the altar is a Last Supper in relief, used with cane stone, designed by Sir George Gilbert Scott, who had a lot to do with renovating the cathedral in the 19th century. The Lady Chapel was the last part of the cathedral to be built, although still over 500 years old. It was started in 1490 at the beginning of the Tudor period. Now this is the first real fresco to be created in an English cathedral for over 800 years, and it's dedicated to St John the Baptist and completed in 2004. It was painted by Sergio Fyodorov, a Russian and these steps, the pilgrim steps. The cathedral became a major place of pilgrimage in the 13th century following the death of William of Perth, a Scottish baker, who was murdered nearby. His body was brought to the cathedral, and in his shrine, which there's no trace now, miracles were reported. And in fact the donations made to the shrine were so much that William of Who was able to rebuild the choir. In the gardens, there's the view across what was originally the monastic herb garden, and this is the remains of the priory. And that has a newly restored Roman wall which dates to 200 AD, and it once surrounded the Roman city, and it was later incorporated in the buildings of the monastery. I hope you enjoyed the history of Rochester Cathedral. Join me again next time when we will study the history of somewhere else in Kent.